Thank you for joining us here on Middle East Matters. Now, history was made earlier this week after diplomats from Israel and Lebanon sat down for US-mediated talks in Washington. The elephant in the room, or the crux of the problem, Hezbollah, was missing from the table. The Iranian proxy has ruled out abiding by any settlement agreement with Israel. This as the war in Lebanon drags on, with the fight between Hezbollah and Israel continuing. But how is the militant group that was believed to be significantly weakened putting up such a fight? Errol Maxwell reports.
Formed in the early 1980s in response to Israel's occupation of southern Lebanon, Hezbollah gained wide support among Lebanese people after it took credit for the Israeli withdrawal in 2000. Then, and in its 2006 war against Israel, the Iran-funded and trained Shia Muslim militia projected the strength to defend Lebanon, in contrast to its weak army.
The resistance has a right to carry arms to liberate the land and defend the country.
A turning point came in its war with Israel following the October 7th attacks. Hezbollah and Israel began exchanging tit-for-tat strikes over the border after Hezbollah attacked Israel in support of its ally Hamas. After nearly a year of that, Israel launched a coordinated attack on Hezbollah members, causing their pagers and walkie-talkies to simultaneously explode in locations across Lebanon. It then assassinated the group's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, in a massive strike in southern Beirut. A blow to its supporters, among whom Nasrallah was hugely popular.
We are all continuing on his path. We're all with him, and we're proud of him.
By the time a ceasefire was signed on the 27th of November 2024, Hezbollah was presumed severely weakened. Over the next 15 months, it held its fire, despite 10,000 documented Israeli violations, according to the United Nations, which killed hundreds more Hezbollah members. Meanwhile, Lebanon's government sought to disarm the group as part of the 2024 ceasefire agreement, without reigniting internal conflict, like in 2008, when attempts to rein in the group led to a short civil war. Part of the challenge is that Hezbollah has embedded itself deeply in Lebanese society. It has a political party as well as a militant wing, and is often called a state within a state. Contrary to expectations, the group has proved resilient since early March, when it began firing rockets at Israel in support of its backer Iran, and in the face of an intense Israeli offensive. Judging by Hezbollah's daily strikes against Israel, its firearms and funding from Iran appear to remain intact. Reportedly, the group continues to smuggle in weapons through Syria, despite the change of regime. A new generation of commanders has brought in a return to hybrid warfare forms and adopted tactics to evade surveillance, such as using handwritten notes to communicate. So far in this conflict, its ground troops have managed to thwart the Israeli army's attempt to build a buffer zone in southern Lebanon.
We can now bring in Dr. Matthew Levitt, Fromer-Wexler Senior Fellow at the Washington Institute and author of numerous books, including Hezbollah, the Global Footprint of Lebanon's Party of God. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. Hezbollah dragged Lebanon into a war with Israel in early March. There was widespread consensus that the militant group had been significantly weakened after the flare-up with Israel in 2024. How is it that 6 weeks on, this group is still putting up a fight?
Thank you for having me. Look, this is a group that has been severely degraded, from having about 150,000 rockets and missiles to having just a few tens of thousands, probably 20 to 30,000, a much, much smaller number of long-range rockets. The fact that it can still fire into Israel doesn't surprise. The fact that it chose to do so, even though it understands that the likelihood of getting those rockets replenished is much smaller, the fact that its budgetary needs are much bigger, is a sign of just how badly the Iranians wanted them to jump into this war. This is actually the second time Hezbollah dragged Lebanon into a war with Israel that it didn't want. First in support of Hamas after October 7th, now in support of Iran. And you have a situation where the Iranians are saying they won't allow a ceasefire on the Iran front without Hezbollah, acknowledging effectively that Lebanon is being held hostage to Hezbollah acting at Iran's behest, not at Lebanon's behest.
You said they were severely degraded after 2024, yet 6 weeks on, they continue to fire rockets into Israel. So where are they getting these arms from, and who's financing them?
Hezbollah stockpiled a significant, really significant amount of weaponry over the years, and it is drawing down on those stockpiles now. It is still getting small amounts of weapons smuggled across the border from Syria, but the new regime in Syria has been intercepting many of those shipments as well. We're seeing Hezbollah fire many more short-range rockets into northern Israel and far fewer long-range rockets, for example, at Tel Aviv. We're seeing Hezbollah try and use drones. Even just today, a Hezbollah drone was shot down by the Israelis. More frequently, drones and some of the smaller scale rockets, they're still able to produce in underground facilities north of the Litani River in Lebanon. And that's why the United States and Israel is trying to press the Lebanese armed forces, the Lebanese military, to dismantle some of those weapons production sites in Lebanon.
And what about the money?
Hezbollah is having a money problem. Now, the U.S. Treasury reported in November of last year that Hezbollah had received about $1 billion with a B from Iran that year, after the Israeli onslaught on Hezbollah in 2024. But now with the Iran war, it's unclear that Iran is able to send as much money as reliably and as quickly. There's no question Iran is still sending money, but we do see Hezbollah trying to make up some of the gap in terms of their international illicit financing schemes in places like South and North America and Africa and in Europe. We do see a severe uptick in those types of activities to try and bridge that gap. And Hezbollah is in a little bit of a concern right now that depending how Iran comes out of this war, Iran is certainly going to have many more expenses of its own. It's not a question of whether or not Iran will continue to fund Hezbollah. It certainly will. But whether it'll be able to continue funding Hezbollah at the rate and to the extent that it was before. But even if Iran is only providing Hezbollah several $100 million instead of $1 billion, that's enough for Hezbollah to prioritize weapons over some of the political activities, for example, that it also engages in.
In the report which we aired before the interview, Emerald said that Israel reportedly violated the 2024 ceasefire in Lebanon over 10,000 times, some reports up to 15,000 times. Why do you think Hezbollah never responded then?
Well, first, I would challenge the characterization that this was a violation of the ceasefire. The ceasefire specifically included a side letter with the United States, which explained that Israel had a right to continue hitting Hezbollah if and when the Lebanese armed forces did not. And so the Israelis were continuing to target Hezbollah over the course of this time as Hezbollah operatives popped up, as their weapons facilities popped up, or in cases where the Lebanese armed forces declined to raid certain facilities. The bottom line is that now, because Hezbollah has had such leadership losses, a significant number of senior Hezbollah positions are being filled by Iranian officials from Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, from the Quds Force. And whereas in the June war, it was a significant war with Iran, but it was limited, this more recent war, both Israeli and American officials off and on have explicitly talked about an interest in seeing regime change in Iran. That makes this for Iran an existential conflict, and by extension, an existential conflict for Hezbollah as well. Because if this regime in Iran were to fall, Hezbollah's ability to maintain the kind of income and weapons that it has enjoyed for decades now would be basically impossible.
We've mentioned how Hezbollah continues to drag Lebanon into these conflicts with Israel. Does the group still enjoy the support of the Shia population in Lebanon?
The Lebanese armed forces are kind of referred to as the glue that holds Lebanon together. And they include members of all the confessional elements of society and still do have tremendous support. There is within Hezbollah a significant drop of support, including from within the Shia community. Now, the hardline supporters are still very much in support of Hezbollah. Don't get me wrong. But overwhelmingly within Lebanon, it's not just that you have a government in Lebanon that just recently outlawed Hezbollah militant activity in the country and is seeking to assert a monopoly over the use of force for the first time in decades. It's really something that we're seeing much more broadly across the population. Consider that Naim Qassem, the current Secretary General, the head of Hezbollah, said that the reason he's against direct Lebanese-Israeli negotiations is because it shouldn't be done without national consensus. Well, Hezbollah has never sought national consensus when it dragged Lebanon into war time and time again. And now that Hezbollah is weak and sees that it's not just Israel and the United States and France, but Lebanon itself, the government and the people that are challenging Hezbollah's militant supremacy, now they want consensus. And I think it's a sign of Hezbollah's political weakness.
As part of that 2024 ceasefire agreement, the government in Lebanon was supposed to disarm Hezbollah. But how is that likely to happen when even Israel has not succeeded in getting Hamas to disarm over in Gaza?
Well, the Hamas and Gaza thing is actually a very separate, difficult military conundrum. And part of the issue there is because there is no domestic military. There is no Palestinian Authority military in Gaza that anyone can hand over to, empower, provide salaries, provide weapons to let them do the job of asserting monopoly over the use of force within their own territory. Contrast that with Lebanon, where you have a Lebanese armed forces, which is capable and does have the support of the population. It has a salary problem, where as much as 50% of the forces who've been deployed to the south have not been working as soldiers at any given time because they weren't getting paid and they had to work in restaurants and as Uber drivers to put food on the table. So the first thing that the United States and France and other countries can do in return for an LAF, Lebanese Armed Forces, commitment to actually disarm Hezbollah is to pay those salaries. And if we were to do that, and if the political command were to be given by the senior political leadership in Lebanon, I think we could see something very different in Lebanon, even as for the past several decades, there's been a wariness of doing that because Hezbollah was so strong. Hezbollah today, in the wake of the Israeli onslaught in 2024 and what we've seen in the continuing Israeli strikes against their capabilities under the context of the ceasefire, Hezbollah is much, much weaker and hopefully weak enough that the Lebanese armed forces can come in and actually carry out the disarmament that's required under the ceasefire.
Finally, we have to remember that Hezbollah is more than just a militant group, because over in Lebanon, it's a political party as well, with Lebanese members, a Lebanese support base, representatives in the country's parliament and cabinet. But it seems that it's Iran that calls the shots, doesn't it?
Hezbollah has always had this dual identity, where anybody who says that it's not part of the fabric of Lebanese society is wrong. As you said, it is part of the political process, etc. But anybody who says that it is solely and only Lebanese is also wrong, as we have seen now as Hezbollah has dragged all of Lebanon into a war with Israel, not once but twice, that nobody in Lebanon other than Hezbollah wanted. The fact that there are so many Iranians, not Lebanese, but Iranians who are now in leadership positions within Hezbollah tells you everything you need to know. The fact that Hassan Nasrallah, the late Secretary General, who you mentioned in the lead up to our conversation, who was killed by the Israelis, was literally found in an embrace with an IRGC general when their bodies were found after the Israeli airstrike, is a very physical reminder of the nature of that relationship. And so we need to break that relationship between one Lebanese party and a foreign country and create a situation where all the Lebanese parties in Lebanon are doing what's in Lebanon's interest. And the way to do that is not to stop their political activity per se. It's just to stop their ability to be enforcers of their will, not through politics, but through the end of a gun. Remember that Hezbollah actually has a dedicated assassination unit. They call it Unit 121, dedicated not to assassinating Israelis, but to assassinating Lebanese that they disagree with. That has to be put to a stop.
Dr. Matthew Levitt, we're going to have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it for this edition of Middle East Matters. Thank you very much for watching.